I've had a lot of fun making these videos where we go back and look at old gaming magazines or Guinness World Record gaming books or just, something similar to that, like old strategy guides and such. And I actually found these books, or rather, I should say my mom found these books because it was just one of those things where she saw them at my sister's book fair and she decided to be kind enough to buy them for me like 2-3 years ago at this point. So the first one we're going to be looking at today is the Ultimate Nintendo Fanbook, and then I also have this Essential Guide to Retro Gaming, which it is a bit of a heftier boy, so we'll go through and look at that in a separate video because I found out after opening it up that these were actually printed by the same company, publishing company, printing company. I'm not exactly sure how those things work when it comes to books. Obviously with video games you have your developers and you have your publisher. Sometimes the developer is the publisher, but when it comes to books, I'm assuming it's written by a certain person or a group of people and then printed or published by a different company. Not sure. Anyways, I wanted to go through this one first because this one more or less covers the fundamentals and the history of Nintendo, which would definitely come into play once we go through this book because there's a lot of Nintendo oriented stuff in here. So again, we'll look at this in a future video, but for now, let's go ahead and look at the Ultimate Nintendo Fanbook together. Alright, so hopefully you guys have a good view of the book here. So first things first, when you open it up, it says the Ultimate Nintendo Fanbook, and then when you flip the page, hold on, I think I could, maybe if I move the camera up just a little bit more, yeah, there we go. Okay, that looks a little bit better, I think. Then this is what I was talking about right here. It says, by Mortimer Children's, an imprint of Welbeck Children's Limited. So yeah, it's by this Mortimer group, and I noticed that same name on the other book that we're going to be looking at in a future video. So I guess they're printed by the same company or whatever. But then we go in here, we have the contents. It says, we love Nintendo. Then you have Nintendo's history, Nintendo superstars, and the greatest games. So we're not going to read every line of this book because that would take a very long time, obviously. But we're at least going to flip through, have a good look at it. And, I never necessarily want to go through and read the entire book anyway, line for line, because I don't want to devalue anybody's purchase of this book. Because obviously, if I just give you an audiobook version of it, that would kind of be stealing from the original creators, whether that be going and buying an audiobook version or an actual digital or physical version of it on Amazon or something like that. So we'll at least look at the book. You can pause if there's certain things you want to read, but again, I wouldn't want to devalue anybody actually purchasing this book just out of respect to the people that actually made it. We love Nintendo. There's no bigger name in video games than Nintendo. It has the coolest characters, consoles, games, and computer crazes. From Mario to Donkey Kong, Zelda to Pikachu, and with iconic machines such as the Switch, Game Boy, and Nintendo Entertainment System, the Japanese giants are total legends. The Ultimate Nintendo Fanbook is your 100% unofficial guide to these gaming greats. It's packed with amazing info, fun facts, and secret stuff. Discover all about the record-breaking series Super Mario Bros., Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, Pokemon, and The Legend of Zelda, and loads more. See how Nintendo grew from making play cards in the 1800s to leading the way with new consoles and video game tech today. You can even take a glimpse into a fascinating future. Let the action begin and enjoy your adventure through the greatest gaming galaxy. And they have this beautiful artwork here of New Super Mario Bros. U. Say what you will about New Super Mario Bros. U, the art style in that game, or at least graphically speaking, is just absolutely amazing, man. I've always loved how the new Super Mario Bros. Games looks. And then, yeah, from here they start to talk about how Nintendo actually started out not making video games since the company was founded back in the 1800s. Right here it says 1889, which for those that don't know, yeah, Nintendo just turned 135 a couple of weeks ago, which is just absolutely insane, man. 135 years. And they haven't even spent, the majority of their life was actually spent doing stuff like this, making toys, accessories, and trading cards and such. They didn't even start making video games until the 70s. So they spent more or less 80-ish years of the time of the company existing, just again doing stuff like this, and they only spent the last 50 years doing video games, which is insane because again, that's almost only a third of their lifespan, and yet that's what everybody knows them for nowadays. But even then, I mean, they're growing outside of the video game realm. I mean, you have their amusement parks and museums and movies on top of all the video games, and the upcoming console that everybody knows is on the horizon with the Switch successor. I mean, they've even confirmed at this point that the Switch successor will be announced sometime before this coming March, so that'll be really exciting. But yeah, it's just insane when you think about it that way, how the thing that they've been doing for less time compared to everything else is what they're actually known for nowadays. But it's still pretty cool. It just goes to show how great they are at making video games, that even though they spent less than half of the time of the company existing doing that, that's what they're known for. And again, it just goes to show how amazing they are at that. And it's pretty cool again to see them going outside of what they've been doing for the last 50 years and really expanding into other other mediums like movies and amusement parks and all that, like we just talked about. But yeah, so see how Nintendo rose from simple cart products to bossing the world of arcades and home console action. Long before the creation of our favorite pixel-powered pals, Nintendo started making playing cards. The company was set up by craftsman Fusajiro Yamauchi in 1889 in the Japanese city of Kyoto. Yamauchi's favorite flower-based Hanafuda cards were very popular, and soon they were selling other player cards around the world. See, it's funny, whenever I try to read Japanese, it's easier for me to read it in either hiragana or katakana. Whenever I try to read the Romaji version of Japanese words, it's actually harder for me to read it. Because here, if I was to say that properly, like in actual hiragana, it would have been like Fusajiro Yamauchi, and like that's how you actually would have said that if you were saying it like Japanese, like, but since it's spelled out in Romaji, it just kind of threw me off. But yeah, you got that. You got some of their electronics here with the Nintendo Beam Gun, which was a hit in Japan in the early 70s. Right here in this picture, we have the Famicom, which was the Japanese version of the NES. It released there as the Famicom. In the States, we got it as the NES, or the Nintendo Entertainment System. And same thing happened with the SNES, where over there it was called the Super Famicom. Over here, it was the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Over here, we had the gray and purple buttons. Over there, they had the iconic, you know, like red, yellow, blue, and green buttons. Donkey Kong comes along, make way for the game-changing ape of the 1980s. And yeah, everybody knows how this goes. Like, even though Mario is basically Nintendo's main mascot or like main thing nowadays, it actually started with Donkey Kong. And even though you were technically playing as Mario in that game, I mean, the game was called Donkey Kong. Mario was born. Jumpman was actually the original name given to Mario. In 1981, he was described as a carpenter, not the famous plumber we all know, and he leaped into action to save Lady and beat barrel-bashing Donkey Kong. The arcade fun kept fans pumping in their coins as they tried to progress through the level. So yeah, even you were technically playing as Mario in the original Donkey Kong, but there his name was really just Jumpman, and he didn't become Mario until later on. Here they talk about the Game & Watch and stuff like that. Oh, this is actually for the anniversary editions where they re-released some NES games in the form of Game & Watch systems, which was really cool. You see this one here, like the Zelda one. I want to get those in my collection someday. Time to entertain. So yeah, they released the Famicom in Japan in 1983, and then over here in the US, we got it in 1985, where you had games like Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, and, you know, all the classics there. And then just a few years later, in 1989, they released the Game Boy. And every time that I think of 1989, the first thing that comes to my mind, which is hilarious, is actually Batman 1989. You know, for me, when it comes to years, I usually associate the year with what games were coming out that year. Like, if you say 2016, I say Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare and Modern Warfare Remastered. If you say 2015, I think, like, you know, like Black Ops 3, for example. But when it comes to 1989, that's the one time where I think of a movie, and yeah, it's Batman 1989 that comes to mind every time that I think of that year. Nintendo goes super. We got the Super Nintendo in 1990. That brought us some of the best games and platformers of all time, like Super Mario World and Donkey Kong Country, and a bunch of other innovative titles like Super Mario RPG and Super Metroid and Star Fox and F-Zero. Like, the list goes on and on. The Super Nintendo, not only is it the first console that I ever played on, and again, I know I've said this so many times, I'm sorry for sounding like a broken record, but I always just reiterate why the Super Nintendo means so much to me, just because this is a relatively small channel, which means we have new viewers coming in all the time. So if you've heard this spiel, feel free to skip ahead like 10 to 20 seconds. But the first vivid memory from my life is playing Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo when I was 3 years old, you know, sitting late in the evening, sitting in front of the CRT, running through the temple level with Diddy Kong, jumping on the tires, avoiding the snakes and all that. Absolutely just so much nostalgia and love for the Super Nintendo, not only because of that, but also just because it is an amazing system in its own right. So I love the Super Nintendo, tons of nostalgia there. Then obviously in 1996 we got the Nintendo 64, which is just a fantastic console again in its own right, and was such a huge generational leap, going from a 16-bit system like the Super Nintendo to a system like this where you're running full 3D graphics games, and you even have games like Resident Evil 2 and Super Mario 64, Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Mario Kart 64, the first Super Smash Bros. So many amazing games there. Then you had games that kind of bridged the gap between 3D but also their classic 2D stuff like Kirby 64. I love the Nintendo 64 so much. Even though playing Mario Party is enough to literally carve a hole in your hand, I still love the console. Then in 2001, we got the GameCube, which again is such an amazing system and one that I have so much nostalgia for. I love the GameCube, original Xbox, PS2 era. Not only were each of the consoles pumping out some amazing exclusives like Halo on the original Xbox, and then you had, I mean, when it comes to the place, like, where do I even begin there? You have games like Ratchet & Clank, Sly Cooper, Jak and Daxter, you know, the SOCOM games, Gran Turismo, like, the list literally goes on and on, Killzone. And then on the GameCube, I mean, come on, dude, Zelda, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, Mario Sunshine. Like, there were so many amazing first-party exclusives for the Nintendo GameCube, and it's a shame that it really, in the grand scheme of Nintendo consoles, I mean, you even see here, like, 22 million, like, that's nothing to the, even the 33 million of the N64 or the 49 million of the Super Nintendo, let alone the 62 million and the 81.5 million of the Game Boy, which, you know, even all these numbers in themselves is nothing compared to what we're gonna get to next. But man, the GameCube is one of those systems where I feel like over time, people have finally learned, like, oh yeah, this was actually an amazing system, and have finally started to give it the love it deserved. Because back in the day, anybody that had a GameCube or played on a GameCube knew how amazing the system was, especially with, even, like, you know, even if it wasn't a long-term exclusive, even having temporary exclusives like Resident Evil 4 when they were still doing the Capcom 5 for the GameCube, for example. Like, the GameCube was a powerhouse, and there were so many amazing games released for the system, and it's awesome that in retrospect, more people are finally picking up GameCubes and again giving that console and that console's library the love that it deserves. But then, just 5 years later in 2006, obviously we got the Nintendo Wii, and yeah, as you can see from the sales, 101 million. There's nothing that I can say about the Wii that hasn't been said before. It is such an amazing system. It lasted for 11 years, from 2006 to 2017, with I believe the final game being like a Just Dance game or something like that released for the system. But I absolutely adore the Wii. Some people aren't a huge fan of the motion controls or the waggle or this, that, or the other, but I've always loved that stuff because I'm of the mindset that video games aren't just a GameCube controller. They aren't just an Xbox 360 controller. They can also be waggle. They can also be motion controls. They can also be big quirky gamepads. They can also be touch controls on an iPad or an iPod. They can also be butt ugly red screens with these giant bulky headsets that sit on a table that you stick your face into and play a nauseating match of tennis in the 1990s. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, it's one of those things where, like, gaming isn't just one thing. Gaming is so, it can be so much more than just your bog standard Xbox or PlayStation controller. And I'm not dissing gaming as a whole, because obviously I spend 99% of my time playing games on those consoles, more or less, or playing with those types of control schemes. But again, gaming can be and should be allowed to be so much more than that. Let it expand to VR. Let it go crazy and do your mobile game gotcha stuff. Let gaming be whatever it wants to be. Even if something isn't particularly for you, like I've always said, I'm not always one for, like, the super competitive PvP MOBA type of games nowadays. It's just one of those things where if I'm playing a game, usually I gravitate to something that's, you know, maybe has some PvP-ish elements, like Call of Duty. Like, that's been my main multiplayer game that I actually stick with in terms of live service games nowadays, ever since Finest Hour on the PS2. Obviously, Call of Duty only really became a live service back in 2019, but, you know, to this day, I don't really touch live service games with a 10-foot flagpole, but Call of Duty is the one that I actually stick with just because I enjoy the game. But otherwise, when it comes to some of the more competitive or more, I don't know, I guess time-sucky live service games, I don't go near that stuff. It's nothing against the games, it's just more or less a time thing and really just like what I want out of a video game. And, you know, the stuff that's clearly just trying to be a black hole for your time isn't necessarily something I'm going to gravitate to. But for some people, that's exactly what they're looking for. And that's really the point that I'm trying to make here. Different strokes for different folks, as discussed. As that sounds, I've always hated that saying because it sounds so disgusting. Video games can be just whatever they want to be. And again, for me, I've always loved the waggle and the motion controls and all that stuff. I've always just thought it was like a fun personality trait of the Wii. But then moving on here, wait, where in the world is the, where's the Nintendo DS? That should have been right in, I mean, if they covered the Game Boy, I mean, I assume they're going to be covering that here soon, right? Next up, we got the Wii U, which is actually one of my favorite consoles of all time. I absolutely adore the Wii U, you know, the setup between the gamepad, the games that released for the system, love the Wii U to death. And then we had the Wii Mini. Literally no data on the sales. For those who don't know, the Wii Mini was like a stripped down version of the Wii. It was like the Wii Lite. There was no internet features, no GameCube backwards compatibility. Forget it. The Nintendo Switch sold 103 million as of 2022. That's a lot higher now, but yeah, they go on to cover that. And obviously, you know, as much as I love the Wii U, there's an argument to be made that basically every main game that released for the Wii U is available on Switch. There is still a few exclusives over on the Wii U, and in some cases, there's games that even if they're available on the Switch, I prefer to play on the Wii U still, like Super Mario 3D World, for example. In the Switch version, they sped up the movement by like 25%, and I just prefer the speed of the original movement. here in Wii U, so that's why I gravitate towards that one over the Switch version, for example. Again, there is an argument to be made that most of the games that released for the Wii U, most of the big titles have made their way to the Switch. I mean, the big Zelda title that was supposed to be exclusive to Wii U, that ended up just being a launch title for the Switch. You know what I mean? Here we go. Now they're talking about the handhelds. Nintendo has put so much fun and action at your fingertips over the years. Check out some of the ultimate handheld heroes. Yeah, the DS, releasing in 2004. Then in 2006, we got the DS Lite, 08/09, depending on the region. We got the DSi and the DSi XL and all that. Then 2011, 3DS, and the rest is history, baby. Oh man, we can't forget to talk about Pokemon Pinball for Ruby and Sapphire. I know it sounds like I'm joking right now, but that game actually is a lot of fun. I always love the Pokemon Pinball games. And then Nintendo Superstars. It's funny how it says Nintendo Superstars, that you have like Ryu from Street Fighter in here and Sonic, which is Sega. And obviously, if you know anything about video game history, Sega was like a completely different console manufacturer for the longest time during the 90s. And now they go through and break down each of the individual characters and their histories. And I know we've already been going for a little while, so I'm not going to hover on like each thing, because I feel like we already covered a lot of ground when talking about, you know, like the various consoles and games from before. Like, we already kind of touched on some of the characters, so we already kind of touched on Mario's history here, how he started out as Jumpman, but then, you know, Mario is just, I have so much love for Mario, right? Like, not only is Mario an amazing series of platformer games, whether you're looking at the 2D platformers like Super Mario Wonder, or the new Super Mario Bros. Games, or the 3D platformers like Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2, but then also all the spin-offs that he's been involved in with like Mario Party, Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, Mario Strikers, but like the list goes on, and then Super Smash Bros., which obviously isn't necessarily a Mario thing, but like, you know, obviously Mario's like a main part of that. He's one of the main faces of it, and it's just, I don't know, man. I love Mario. Seeing this Italian plumber with his mustache and his big blue eyes and his overalls just always makes me happy, man. Next up, we got Luigi with his first appearance being in Mario Bros. Not Super Mario Bros. On the NES, but rather Mario Bros. The arcade game where, you know, him and Mario, you'd be like jumping, trying to jump on top of the enemies coming out of the tube so you can get the highest score or whatever. Donkey Kong, obviously his first appearance was Donkey Kong. Princess Peach, first appearance was Super Mario Bros. In 1985, and you know, you have to free her from the castle or save her from Bowser. And then Toad, same thing, Super Mario Bros. The princess is in another castle. Yoshi, his first appearance was in Super Mario World, where, you know, you can jump on his back and make him eat apples and stuff. Wario, his first appearance was in Super Mario Land 2 Golden Coins, one of my favorite 2D Mario games. That, and you know, a lot of people talk about Mario Land 2, but not enough people talk about Mario Land 1. I love Mario Land 1 so much. You know, it's one of those games where you turn it on, beat it within an hour, and it's not too difficult, but it's so fun and it's so innovative. You had like those shooter sections in it, as well as the traditional 2D platforming. Definitely give it a shot, man. The Super Mario Land 1 is one of the most innovative 2D Mario games, hands down, even to this day. Waluigi introduced in Mario Tennis in 2000. Bowser, obviously 1985. Rosalina introduced in Super Mario Galaxy. I've always loved Rosalina, an absolute princess. Got the Goomba, obviously Super Mario Bros. Koopa Troopa, same thing. Piranha Plant, same thing. Princess Daisy introduced in Super Mario Land, which is what I'm saying. A shout out to this guy for showing some appreciation and love for Princess Daisy. Birdo, first appearance was Doki Doki Panic. If you don't know the history there, basically Super Mario Bros. 2 in the US, I mean, it's technically Super Mario Bros. 2 here, right? But it's actually a reskin of a game called Doki Doki Panic. If you're confused, just do your research on it. It's actually pretty fascinating, but yeah, Super Mario Bros. 2 isn't actually Super Mario Bros. 2. I mean, it is, but you know what I mean. Again, just do your research there, and then that'll kind of tie into like why the Lost Levels is what it is, and why it's called the Lost Levels here, but it's called Mario Bros. 2 over in Japan. So yeah, it's actually a really fun learning piece. So just read some articles, watch some videos. I guarantee you it's one of those things that'll both blow your mind, but also just be an interesting read slash watch slash, you know, a cool bit of nugget to add to your video game knowledge. Cappy from Mario Odyssey, Bowser Jr. from Super Mario Sunshine, who then went on to also be like basically the main villain of sorts in New Super Mario Bros. On the DS and all that. Boom Boom from Super Mario Bros. 3, the Blooper in Super Mario Bros. Hammer Bro, Bullet Bill, another character introduced technically in Doki Doki Panic with Shy Guy. Then you got the Boo. Diddy Kong, I have always absolutely loved Diddy Kong. Again, just harkening back to that nostalgia of the first vivid memory from my life. Literally, you know, just Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong hanging out together. These two are like my heroes. Love interest. Diddy Kong's girlfriend is Dixie Kong. She debuted in Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. I always hate how people sometimes mispronounce his name and say Diddy Kong's Quest. Like, sure, it makes sense. It's Diddy Kong's Quest, but no, it's Diddy's Kong Quest. Do people not understand the play on words? Got the Bob-omb. I don't want to have to go through and name off every single character because there's a lot in here, obviously, but we'll at least flip through and admire some of the art. I love how they have, like, a mix of 2D art, obviously, in here, because this is, like, the original render from Pokemon Red of Charizard, but then they also have some of the 3D renders of, like, Pikachu right here and Jigglypuff, and then, again, some of the 2D art here with Mewtwo. I love how they don't discriminate either. Like, they aren't just going in order of the game's release. Like, they're just kind of throwing characters everywhere. Like, here's some characters from Red and Blue, but then, hey, here you go. Here's a Pokemon from Sword and Shield. We got Link with his first appearance being in 1986 and The Legend of Zelda. Nowadays, it's one of those games where, like, you can go into it blind, but honestly, I would probably recommend going in with, like, maybe a map or a guide pulled up on the side just in case you get lost. Like, I would say go through it as blind as you can for as long as you can, but if you absolutely hit a brick wall and you're getting frustrated, then look to the guide or the walkthrough or whatever, just because it is one of those games where it literally does not hold your hand. It barely gives you any hints. It does kind of give you some hints, but I mean, it's just nowadays might not be a bad idea to have one of those things on the side, but still go through it as blind as you can for as long as you can, because there's a lot of charm there. It really harkens back to those days of just like, you're plopped in the middle of nowhere, and that's it. Just go. That's one of the things that I've always loved about the original Metroid on NES. Like, as much as I love Metroid Zero Mission, playing the original Metroid on NES, like, there's no story, there's no build-up, there's no cutscenes, there's nothing like that. You're just, like, dumped into the game, and it's just like, hey, that's it. You make your own adventure. You figure out what's going on. Like, the game developers, they're just gonna sit back and watch and laugh at you. It really just comes down to how much time you're willing to dedicate to the game, you know? Are you willing to dedicate the next, like, couple dozen hours to beating the game, or do you just want to pull up a guide and finish it in, like, I don't know, a couple of hours? You know what I mean? At this point, I've always been the guy where I'm like, hey, I don't care how you play a game. There's no wrong way to play a video game. I don't care if you use a guide, if you use a walkthrough, if you I don't care what you do while you're playing a video game. If you just listen to a podcast while you're playing it, if you just play for a half hour here and there, or if you decide to binge it for 12 hours straight, whatever you want to do, there is no way, like, there is no wrong way to play a video game, wrong way to approach a video game. The only wrong way to play a video game is to not play it at all. Princess Zelda introduced in The Legend of Zelda, you would hope. Ganon, same thing. Impa, same thing. Got Kirby, who was introduced not on a Nintendo home console, which is interesting considering most of Kirby's games nowadays, well, literally all of them, since Nintendo doesn't really have a dedicated handheld or console anymore. It's just a, you know, a mix of the two, both handheld and console. But yeah, Kirby was introduced on the Game Boy with Kirby's Dream Land, which very similar to Super Mario Land. Kirby's Dream Land has always been one of my favorite 2D platformers. It's a very innovative game. It's very cutesy. It is rather short. You could definitely beat it in under an hour, but still, it's really cute. It's a lot of fun. It has so much charm, and it's one of those games that I go back to constantly. You know, if I have like an hour to kill, not even an hour, you can easily beat the game in like 30, 45 minutes tops. If I just have a bit of time to kill, I will whip out the Game Boy, I will pop in Kirby's Dream Land, and I will just go for a playthrough of it just because I love the game that much. Absolutely timeless, endlessly replayable. Love that game to death. Next up, we have King Dedede, which, again, same thing, obviously introduced in the same game there. Next, we got Samus introduced in Metroid, as we had talked about before, 1986, the game where it just plops you in and says, go. Next up, we got Sonic, which is introducing, interesting, because it says it's introduced in Sonic Adventure 2, but obviously Sonic has been there since, you know, like the first Sonic on Sega Genesis. Okay, so they say debut year 2001. That's obviously incorrect. I'm not exactly. Maybe they're saying that this was the first time they were technically in the Nintendo universe, or the first time they appeared on a Nintendo device. Oh, okay, yeah, I see it right here. The Speedy Sonic arrived on Nintendo devices and made his debut in Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Okay, at first I was confused. I was like, Sonic is much older than that, but okay, never mind. And then, yeah, it goes on to show, like, Ryu and Ken and stuff like that, and obviously they're not Nintendo characters. This is just kind of relaying when they appeared on Nintendo consoles for the first time. Okay, so Isabelle showed up in New Leaf, Rabbids with, in 2006 with Rayman, Raving Rabbids, which was, you know, it's funny because when you look at the Rabbids, you think of them as being their own thing with their own TV show and video games and crossovers with Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle and Sparks of Hope, but no, Rabbids was actually a spin-off of the Rayman series and then basically killed Rayman to go off and do their own thing, but I mean, can we get another Rayman game, please? I don't care if it's a 3D platformer like Rayman 2 or a 2D one like Rayman 1 or the Origins and, you know, like Legends, I guess like reboots, if you want to call them that. You know, I don't care what style it is. I just want more Rayman. Then we got Fox from Star Fox, which I had mentioned before during the SNES section. One of the most just revolutionary, innovative, mind-blowing games ever released. Like, seeing that game run on a Super Nintendo is still impressive to this day. Pac-Man, Inkling, man, I love Splatoon to death. death. I've been in love with that game ever since I played it on the Wii U for the first time. That is still, when I think Splatoon, I still think of the first game on the Wii U. Don't get me wrong, 2 and 3 are fantastic. It's just, when I think of my first experiences with the game, it was with the first one on Wii U. So much nostalgia and love for it. Still have my physical copy, of course. And then greatest games. Grab your controller and lock your eyes on the screen because you're about to experience the greatest games in Nintendo history. From the world and wonders of Super Mario Bros. To Zelda, Pokemon, Splatoon, the classic Tetris, and many more of these awesome video games reveal everything you love about gaming. Enjoy the action. So let's see what they got in here. Super Mario Bros. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, what do they got on here? They actually have a whole section talking about New Super Mario Bros. So New Super Mario Bros. Was a smash success on the DS with a new look that still had a cool retro style. New Super Mario Bros. U was Mario's first Wii U adventure and had new modes and features such as Challenge Mode and Coin Battle. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe brings the awesome series to the Switch with the new Super Luigi U game giving the green guy a starring role in a platform adventure for the first time. Yeah, that's right, that was released during the Year of Luigi, where they were doing a bunch of stuff themed around Luigi, whether it be stuff like New Luigi U, which was kind of like, it was sort of a DLC for New Super Mario Bros. U, except it was basically like an entirely new game all at the same time, because even if it was technically DLC, it ended up being released on its own as like its own standalone game, but it is still technically just a standalone DLC of this game because it's essentially all just like remixed levels from this game. Well, it's not even remixed levels necessarily. It's like entirely new levels just using the Mario Bros. U assets. It still has the same world map, except all of the levels are unique and different, so the world map is just kind of irrelevant, but you go through the same type of progression at least. Not like that's a bad thing, because you literally go through the exact same progression in every Mario game ever. You just go from one stage to the next. It's been that way since the NES games. Like, you know, that's just standard stuff. But yeah, man, New Super Luigi U, one of my favorite 2D platformers. It's so hectic, especially with the shortened timer, but it works, especially with Luigi's more, what do you want to call it, like frantic nature, where he's always just kind of like scared. I mean, that's part of why Luigi's Mansion had so much charm, just because obviously Luigi, he's a bit of a scaredy cat goofball, so seeing him get all scared when he's like hunting ghosts and stuff like that is really cool. But then seeing a game like New Luigi U, where he's running, he's panicked the whole time, his feet are fluttering, the timer's going down, the music's all hectic, giving you anxiety in real life and in the game. It works so well. Super Mario 3D World, we already talked about that, one of my favorite 3D platformers, and one of my favorite 3D Mario games. I don't know, it's hard for me to pick a favorite 3D Mario game, but honestly, if I had to pick just one, I know it's a controversial take, but I think I would have to go with Super Mario 3D World. I know it's not your typical, you know, like 3D Mario game, because when you think of 3D Mario, you have your Mario 64s, and then you have your 2D games that are more like stage-based, like the original Super Mario Bros. Or New Super Mario Bros. U. But Super Mario 3D World combines both of what I love about both the 3D and 2D games, where you have those exploration and 3D platforming elements, just because I love 3D platformers in general. But then you also have the 2D linear, well, not even linear stage progression, because you can choose what level you're going to do next on the overworld map. You know, you can like, usually you'll have at least 2 options, if not more, as to what level you're going to do next. You can go back and do certain stages to get more stars, to open up more secrets, and advance through the game. So there's still some non-linearity like you would expect from a 3D Mario game, while still retaining the 2D linearity to it. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard to explain into words, but you know what I'm trying to say. You gotta love that ADHD, man. It's like, I know what I'm trying to say, but sometimes I just have trouble saying it. You know what I mean? But hopefully that makes sense. It just combines both of what I love about the 2D and the 3D games, of course. Next up, we got Mario Party, as we discussed before, playing that game on the N64. Guaranteed to literally drill a hole in your hand. Super Mario Odyssey, that is an obvious pick right there. Super Mario Odyssey, absolutely fantastic 3D platformer. Luigi's Mansion, we also already covered that. Love that game and its sequels. Mario Kart, starting out life on the Super Nintendo with Super Mario Kart. I have so much nostalgia for that one too. You know, split screening that game with my mom back in the day. So many fond memories with the Super Nintendo Super Mario Kart, and then obviously with other games like Mario Kart DS that I've easily put thousands of hours into, man. I love Mario Kart DS. And Mario Kart 8. I know this is going to be crazy for me to say, but when I revisit Mario Kart 8, I specifically revisit the Wii U version of the game just for nostalgia reasons, you know. As much as I love the Switch version, there's a lot of great DLC there between all the new characters and courses and tracks and skins and customizable parts for your karts and all that, but I just have a lot of nostalgia for the Wii U version in particular, so when I go to revisit that game, that's the version that I always reach for. Same with Super Smash Bros, honestly. Again, I know the Switch version has a lot of DLC, but I just have a lot of nostalgia for the Wii U and the 3DS one, you know what I mean? Next up we got WarioWare, an absolutely legendary series where the one thing I love about WarioWare is how every game is technically the same in concept, but yet feels so radically different. Like, every WarioWare game feels so unique while still retaining that same quick minigame concept. You know, you dive in, you have a minigame that lasts for like 10 to 30 seconds, maybe a minute at absolute tops, depending on the game, and then you're on to the next thing. Yet despite that, every game has its own theme, has its own gimmick, depending on the hardware it was released for, or the minigames still find a way to be hectic while not being overwhelming. It's just, I don't know, man, there's something about WarioWare where it has always struck that perfect balance between being kind of stressful yet still fun, so it's not, you know, stressful enough to not be fun, but it's just that fun kind of tenseness, you know what I mean? I love WarioWare. It's also great for a guy like me that doesn't necessarily like playing with people or just doesn't necessarily like being around people in general. You know, I spend 99% of my time alone just because I'm happier when I'm by myself. But despite that, WarioWare, even though minigame games you kind of think of as being something like Mario Party where you typically play with other people, you can still enjoy WarioWare by yourself. Furthermore, that actually goes for Mario Party as well. You know, most people probably play Mario Party with other people. I play all the Mario Party games by myself, and I just have fun playing against the AI just because I enjoy that, you know, like the board game aesthetic of the game where, you know, you're like rolling the dice, doing certain things, playing through different mini games, trying to see who's gonna win. I'm just, you know, even playing by myself against the computer, I have so much fun doing that because, again, I don't know, I'm not a people person. Nowadays, I'm so much happier when I'm by myself. Anytime I'm around somebody or in a situation where I have to be around somebody or talking to somebody, I'm just looking for a way to get out of the situation ASAP, you know what I mean? Next up, we got Donkey Kong talking about the arcade games as well as the, obviously, like the Donkey Kong Country games, and then you have games like Returns and Tropical Freeze. Tropical Freeze is easily one of the best 2D platformers of all time. That game is absolutely beautiful. It's just challenging enough. It's such a good game. If you have not played Tropical Freeze, do yourself a favor, play that, and then also pick up Returns when it drops this January. And then if you have a Nintendo Switch, more likely than not, you have Nintendo Switch Online, so make sure to hop on the SNES app and play through the Donkey Kong Country games as well. And then also make sure to hop over to the Game Boy so you can play the Donkey Kong Land games, because those games are absolutely fantastic as well. Donkey Kong Land 2 and 3 try to be a bit more similar to the SNES counterparts of Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3, but that first Donkey Kong Land game, it's a wholly unique experience, and, you know, I definitely recommend playing through all the land games, but 1 is definitely the one that tries to deviate the most from its console counterpart and literally has nothing in common with it outside of, you know, Donkey Kong being in the game technically. So, yeah, that game, super underrated. Not enough people talk about that one. Definitely check that one out if you can. Next up, we got Yoshi's Island. The Yoshi games are obviously fantastic. Animal Crossing, again, fantastic. Super chill games. You literally can't go wrong with any entry of Animal Crossing. Whether you play, you know, like New Horizons or New League, you go back to even the first one on GameCube, you can't go wrong with any of them. I know some people are gonna be like, oh, the first one's actually N64, you know, because, like, you know, the Japanese version, but I'm talking in the States, we didn't get it until the GameCube, so, yeah, you can't go wrong with literally any version of the Animal Crossing games. Like, they're all fantastic. Next up, we got Legend of Zelda, obviously. Literally every Zelda game is fantastic, as well as the spin-offs like Hyrule Warriors. I absolutely love Hyrule Warriors again. It's, again, another thing where it's like, I feel like the Hyrule Warrior games are super underrated. I feel that way about Warriors games in general, though. I absolutely love the Warrior games. I mean, I know a Warrior, I'm getting it mixed up with Wario. Warrior, it is one of those situations where if you played one Warriors game, you probably played them all, you know, just because the gameplay is so similar between them all, but man, I just love those games. Hacking and slashing thousands of enemies at once, especially in, like, Hyrule Warriors, where we're playing as, like, Link, and they have all the other characters you can play as, like Ganon. It's so much fun, man. So much chaos, but I love it. Next up, then we got Pokemon and Splatoon, of course. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Kirby's first official 3D platformer. Such an absolute masterpiece of a game. Love that game to death. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the latest iteration of Super Smash Bros. Literally, I mean, the name is true. It is the ultimate Super Smash Bros. Has the most stages, has the most characters, everything you'd want in a Smash game, Smash Bros. Ultimate has it. There is something to be said about the fact that, like, hey, this game doesn't have, like, Subspace Emissary, for example, which is one of the reasons that I do actually go back to games like Brawl a bit more, actually, than Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, just because I love playing through Subspace Emissary with all the cutscenes and stuff. Absolutely love that. And then otherwise, outside of Brawl, again, I do end up reaching for the Wii U and the 3DS one more, just because I guess there's more familiarity and nostalgia there with that one, but again, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the name doesn't lie. It is the ultimate one. It has the most characters. It has the most stages. It's just, again, you know, I'm a nostalgic boomer, so as much as I love Smash Bros. Ultimate, as much time as I put into it to getting all the fun collectibles and completing all the modes, I still go back to those classic ones a ton. And hey, for other boomers out there like me that are still playing Melee on the GameCube, you understand what I'm saying. Next up, we got Wii Sports. I mean, you can't have a Nintendo book like this without talking about Wii Sports. Obviously, that was like part of what sold the Wii in the first place. RIP to many TV screens across the world back in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s. Then we have Just Dance, again, you know, huge selling game on the Wii, of course. And then after that, Star Fox Zero. I love Star Fox Zero. That's one of those games that definitely does not get enough love. Say what you will about the controls, you will get used to it. You know what I mean? Like, sure, it may seem a bit different at first, or you may not be used to the control scheme, but just, like, give it a bit of time. After, like, 30 minutes, it's gonna be intuitive. Like, it's one of those games where even if it takes you an entire playthrough, you will get used to the controls at some point, because the game was designed around those controls. Different doesn't mean bad. Like I said before with the Wii stuff, like, way earlier in the video, where video games don't just need to be your standard Xbox or PlayStation controller. They can also be more innovative experiences, like something with the waggle or motion controls of the Wii, or the kind of like motion touchscreeny stuff like you would have saw in Star Fox Zero, where you're like aiming with the gamepad and stuff. Again, video games can be whatever video games want to be, whatever the developers want to make them to be. So just because it's different doesn't mean it's awkward or bad. It's just, it's different. Just give it some time, get used to it, and I promise you'll find the charm in it. I love Star Fox Zero. It's a great game. I genuinely find that game to be so immersive, because you're like the one actually controlling the aiming and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's so cool. I've always loved that game. Next up, we got Metroid Dread. I mean, what do I say about Metroid Dread? Metroid Dread is an absolutely fantastic game. I was so happy to see us get a brand new 2D Metroid game in 2021, because the last one before that was obviously like the 2D remake, or the 3DS remake of Metroid 2. And of course, that game was absolutely fantastic, but, you know, again, getting an actually like a just fully original Metroid game in 2021, that was freaking awesome. After that, we got Big Brain Academy, and yeah, you couldn't have a book like this without talking about Big Brain Academy, considering how important it was to the DS. Kid Icarus, I'm still waiting for a new Kid Icarus game. You know, the original was great. The one on the 3DS was great as well. But we haven't gotten one since that 3DS game like over a decade ago, man. Kid Icarus Uprising. It is such a great game. Why did we never get a follow-up? And then here towards the back, obviously Tetris, one of the best-selling games on the Game Boy. My pap, when he was still alive, was an absolute legend at Tetris, man. Like, I have no idea how he garnered the skills that he did in that game. I was always so jealous of how good he was at Tetris. I have so much nostalgia for Tetris, genuinely. He even had like this full dedicated device that was literally just like a Game Boy looking thing, but just for Tetris. He loved Tetris that much, and I still have it in my closet somewhere, so that's one of those things that I'll always hold on to. Just, you know, man, I love Tetris to death. So many memories with the game, and I can only aspire to be as good as my pap was at Tetris. And then in the back, they just talk about Nintendo of the future. What can Nintendo's characters and games look like in the years to come? So, cloud capabilities, Stream Team, switch it up, talking about the next generation of Nintendo Switch and all that, and then talking about like ray tracing, Mario Chat with some like VR stuff, and then yeah, that's basically where the book ends. Which, hey, it's funny because Nintendo has technically done VR stuff, like Nintendo Labo, anybody? If, you know, I mean, I count that. It technically was VR. And then in the back, they got a bit of a fun Nintendo quiz, so if you want to go ahead and pause it, you can, but they also literally have the answers right here, so even if I would try to do the quiz, it would kind of be cheating because the answers are right here. And then I believe they also have the answers on, yeah, they have the answers right there. And then, see you, Nintendo fans, what an incredible trip through the Nintendo gaming galaxy. You discovered all the greatest characters, games, and consoles, and picked up amazing tips, secrets, and trivia for some of the most the legendary Nintendo titles. I had to make sure I wasn't like misreading that. Yeah, there is a typo. For some of the most the legendary Nintendo titles. It's time to join Mario for another fantastic adventure. Let's go. And then that is the end of the book. The complete 100% independent guide to everything Nintendo. Inside this fantastic fan book, you'll discover Nintendo's best games of all time reviewed and rated. Amazing facts and stats on Nintendo games and consoles, profiles of classic characters including Mario, Kirby, Link, and many more. It's the essential companion for every Nintendo fan. And just like that, we have gone through the entire book. I had a lot of fun looking through this. This was actually my first time going through like the entire book since I got it, and yeah, at some point I do want to go through and actually read the whole thing on my own time, but still, that was a lot of fun flipping through, and I hope you guys had fun as well. I also apologize if it seems like I was talking just a little bit fast towards the end there. I realized that I've been recording for basically an hour at this point, so I didn't want to keep you guys for too long, didn't want to make like an hour plus video of us just flipping through this book. I wanted to respect your time, so Apologies if I ended up talking a little fast towards the end. Again, I just wanted to respect everybody's time while still getting through the entire book in one video. But anyway, as always, a massive shout out, thank you to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all you in the low baller tier, numerous shout out, thank you to all the mid baller tier, Miller asking, Emmy Dynamite, and Vision on G tier, Run Bench, Let's Just Go. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.